Hey, fellas, I'm just a regular guy who thought he had it all figured out. Wife, home, a steady job. 20 years of what I figured was a damn good life. Then one day, she slipped up, and it all came crashing down like a house of cards in a windstorm. Stick with me on this one, and hit that like button. Right now, if you've ever had a gut feeling something wasn't right with your woman, you won't want to miss how I turned the tables and walked away with everything I'd built still in my hand. I'm 58 years old, been a carpenter since I was a kid, working with my hands out in a quiet little suburb just outside the city. That Friday, I rolled home early from the shop, my old Ford pickup rattling down the driveway. I was looking forward to kicking back with a beer, maybe firing up the grill for the weekend. Walked through the front door, and the place was silent. No pots clanging in the kitchen, no smell of supper simmering on the stove. My wife, let's call her Anne, was nowhere around. I figured she'd gone to the grocery store, or maybe popped over to a friend's house down the street. Then the phone rang, one of those old corded ones we've had since the kids were little, still bolted to the wall by the couch. I picked it up, and some guy's voice cut through. "Where's Anne?" "She's meeting me tonight at the motel off Route 9. I froze right there in my tracks, heart thumping like a hammer on a nail. I managed to choke out, "Who the hell are you?" He laughed, real smug and slow, and said, "Ask your wife, pal." Then the line went dead. I stood there in the living room, the receiver still in my hand, buzzing with that empty dial tone. 20 years together, 2 full decades of marriage. And I'd never once thought she'd stab me in the back like this. My knees felt weak, but I didn't sit down. I went upstairs to our bedroom, the one we'd shared since we bought this place back in '99. I dug through her purse, something I'd never even considered doing before in all those years. There it was, plain as day. A stack of messages on her phone, times and dates, motel names, little notes like, "Can't wait to see you." I sank into the recliner by the window, staring out at the oak tree we'd planted when our oldest boy was born. How had I missed it? Was I too busy fixing roofs and building decks for other folks to notice my own house was rotting from the inside? We'd raised 2 kids, both grown and out on their own now, paid off the mortgage after years of scraping by, kept the truck running through every winter. I'd thought we were solid, that we'd made it through the hard times together. Turns out I was the only one holding up my end. Now, fellas, if you've ever caught a whiff of something off with your wife, maybe she started dressing up more for work, or had too many late nights she couldn't explain, drop a comment below. Just say "me too." I'll read every single one and shoot you a reply. Keep listening, because it gets wild. I'm going to tell you how I caught her with her hand in the cookie jar. That night, Anne walked through the door around 8, cool as a cucumber, tossing her keys on the counter like it was any other day. "Work ran late," she said, not even looking at me as she kicked off her shoes. I didn't say a damn thing, just nodded and sipped my beer, keeping my face blank. But inside, my head was spinning like a saw blade. "We've got cameras around the house. Put 'em in after some punk tried to break in back in '05. They're small, tucked into corners, the kind she never paid much mind to." Later that night, after she'd gone to bed, I sat down at the kitchen table with my laptop and pulled up the footage. There she was, clear as daylight, pacing the living room on her phone 2 days earlier. "He doesn't suspect a thing," she said, laughing that laugh I used to love. "I'll see you Friday. Don't be late." I watched it 3 times, each word cutting deeper, but I didn't let myself snap. I clenched my fists, took a deep breath, and started thinking straight. The guy she was talking to, some slick bastard from her office, drives a shiny BMW, wears suits that cost more than my tools, thinks he's king of the hill. I could have tracked him down, busted his windshield, maybe his nose too, but that's not how I roll. I've been around long enough to know hot-headed moves get you nowhere. You don't win by swinging, you win by outsmarting them. So I called up an old buddy, Frank. A lawyer I've known since high school. He's the kind of guy who doesn't blink at a fight. I drove over to his place the next morning, handed him the phone with the messages, showed him the camera clips. "Frank," I said, "she's been playing me for a fool. What can we do?" He leaned back in his chair, cracked a grin, and said, "Buddy, we've got her dead to rights. This is a slam dunk. We filed the papers that week, divorce, full custody of what's mine, no mercy. I didn't tell her a thing. Just let her keep thinking she was in control." A few weeks later, we're standing in a courtroom. Anne's there, all dressed up, looking smug as hell, figuring she'd walk away with half my life. The house I'd built with my own hands. The shop that kept us fed. She didn't know about the ace up my sleeve. Frank stood up, calm as you please, and laid it all out for the judge. He showed the messages. Dates, times, places. Then he played the recording, her voice echoing through that quiet room. He doesn't suspect a thing. You should have seen her face, went white as a sheet, lips trembling. No smart comeback this time. The judge didn't even hesitate. "House is yours," he said to me. "Business too." She gets nothing. That hotshot from her office didn't even show up. Probably knew he'd lost the game. I walked out of that courthouse with my head high, keys to my life still jingling in my pocket. Here's the kicker, fellas. I didn't need to raise my voice or throw a punch. I let her own lies bury her deep. That's how you handle it. After 20 years of being taken for a ride, you don't let them see you sweat. You just take back what's yours, piece by piece. And I did. She called me a few weeks later, voice shaking, crying about how she had messed up, how she wanted to come back. I didn't even let her finish. "You made your choice," I told her. "Live with it." Hung up the phone and poured myself a whiskey. Life's too short to waste on someone who'd tossed 20 years out the window for a fling with some slick-talking nobody. I've been doing all right since then. The shop's busier than ever. Folks around town heard what happened, started bringing me more work, saying they respect a man who keeps his cool. I've got my boys checking in on me, good friends like Frank who've got my back. Hell, I even started fishing again down at the lake, something I hadn't done since the kids were small. Anne, last I heard, she's shacked up in some cheap apartment, still chasing that hotshot who doesn't give her the time of day anymore. Me, I'm sleeping fine at night. No regrets. No looking back. So what do you think of how I played it, fellas? Drop your own story in the comments. I want to hear how you've handled this kind of crap in your life. I'll pick one guy's tale to tell next week. So give me something real. Hit that subscribe button and check out the video next to this one. There's more true stories like this waiting for you. Share this with your buddies too. Us men need to hear these things. Keep our eyes wide open so we don't get burned again.